Hello, friend. Season
4.
The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from a high desert encampment on the frontier of our agrarian hoplite republic. This is a variety program for happy warriors who are getting some seriously bad vibes from the deranged post-Christian technocracy. Grab a tankard of yak's milk and join us by the campfire as Sumo and Cavi return to shake your surveillance, expel your parasites, and generally have a good time. Are you ready? Stand by.
Mystical American Patriot Society. Now available in 3 dimensions.
Hey Sumo, I got my camera fixed.
Cavi!
Hey!
Oh, there you are. Finally, we've got the space storm has been sorted, and we are good. And what I want to say to you, Cavi, today is, first of all, how are you? How are you feeling? I know adjusting to the body of a cat is probably a bit takes some time after being a human and then a television for so long.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird, but it is what it is. Gravity here is kind of still broken. I'm working on fixing that, but I don't have any thumbs, so it might take me like all season to get this fixed.
Well, that's understandable. The gravity is working in my pilot chamber and in the rest of the control room, but it is not with you right now, and that is fine. It is fine. Everyone is good. We're going to make it work. You know, life is, as Bob Ross used to say, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. And that's what we have here. We have a happy accident going on where you have no gravity. And I have, actually, I'm operating, most people, our listeners, we may not seem it because I'm so strong, but I'm actually recording this in 5 times Earth's gravity right now because mine is also a little messed up and things are heavier than they're supposed to be. And if you just live in 5 times Earth's gravity, you get very, your bones grow very dense and your muscles strong very rapidly. So we're going to see how that goes.
The ultimate weightlifting plan.
Ultimate weightlifting plan. Yeah, so today, Cavi, I want to start off by asking you, we have a lot to talk about today. Today's going to be a bit of a hodgepodge episode. I've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about George Orwell. We're going to talk about the English language. We're going to talk about why gay trad is inevitable, why it's inevitable for there to be gay trads. We're talking about what God is. We're going to talk about how the metaphysics of miracles and how they actually work. And we're going to talk about lots of things. And today, but first I want to ask you, Cavi, I want to start off with saying, wie viele Leute zu die Grillparty kommen? All right. Hmm?
Yes.
Wie viele Leute? Alles klar, Kommissar?
Is that Old English?
Alles klar? No, this is German. And I'm speaking German because a little somebody has returned. A little certain somebody has come
Hitler.
back on the world scene. A little mustachy man. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Hitler?
Adolf Hitler is back. Adolf Hitler is back, but this time, as is the new tradition with Netflix and Disney Plus, we're rebooting an old IP, but we're race swapping the characters. Just because this time he's a black man. He's a black man, and Adolf Hitler has actually won an election in Namibia, in the former German province of Africa, which is now the country of Namibia. It used to be German Southwest Africa. Now it's Namibia. And a black man named Adolf Hitler Unona, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, Adolf Hitler Unoma, his parents named him Adolf and then gave him the middle name Hitler. And then his last name Unona is a middle-aged black man with a shaven head and a bit chubby in the cheeks, not in a bad way, very handsome. But he's been elected to his fifth time. His fifth time he's won election. And his name has never hampered him in politics. And so...
Is he the president or something?
He's not the president, but he is...
okay.
He's not the president. But the thing is... he is a member of a local governance. And what people don't realize about Namibia is that there are a lot of small towns in Namibia who, owing to the fact that they used to be German New South Africa, are Nazis. They're black Nazis, which is not something you see very much, but it's very alive and well. Black Nazism is alive and well in Africa. You've been to Africa, Cavi, not this part of it. Are you familiar with this?
I have been to Namibia, but I don't remember seeing Nazis there. It's a beautiful country.
Beautiful country. They don't wear, well, like everything, when you update the IP, you have to change the costumes around. And they don't wear, white Nazis are pretty, we know what the uniform is. It's either goose stepping in a gray thing with a skull on it, a swastika, or it's a skinhead. And black Nazis have a different look that's hard to, they don't really have a standardized uniform so much, but they kind of enjoy Adolf Hitler a little, to the point where parents may or may not name their child Adolf Hitler Unona. Which is not something. Adolf is a dead name in the Western. I mean, you don't name your kid Adolf and you don't name him Judas. Although Adolf is a cool, people still go with Dolph occasionally. Dolph means wolf. I think Adolf means glorious wolf, something like that. But in Africa, in the African tradition, the German tradition is alive and well in Africa of naming your children Adolf. Less so naming them than Hitler and then Unama. But if you had this is my point. Well, I got 2 points with this. One is that you can't. It's just the law of the universe, and people need to be okay with it. You need to understand it. This is why you're going to have gay trads. If you have black Captain America, you also will get black Adolf Hitler. They always go. The two, there's like a balancing of karma that has to happen. And if you can't get the one without the, I don't know why. Take it up with God. It's not my fault, but I've noticed this pattern in nature. Whenever you try to have just one thing, you always bring about its opposite. Every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's a law in physics and apparently a law in metaphysics. And so if you have Black Captain America and Mazel Tov, I haven't actually watched the new one very much. I saw a bit with Harrison. I thought it was weird that Harrison Ford turned into a Red Hulk. Once you start getting multiple Hulks, I don't know. It just loses me.
Harrison Ford is Hulk now?
There's a Red Hulk, there's Green Hulk, and then Harrison Ford, who was like the president, I think, in the movie. He's like the president of America, but he's
super old.
He's also turned into a Hulk, but his skin is red, and I don't know why. I know in the comics there's all kind of Hulks. There's like purple Hulk and green, regular green Hulk and gray Hulk and all these things. But yeah, there's a red Hulk now in the Marvel cinematic universe,
And he's an elderly Hulk.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, when you go Hulk mode, your agedness no longer matters. You transform into this. In fact, the only Hulk comic which I found really interesting was. Do you ever read any of the Hulk comics, Cavi?
Not really. I've never been a comic guy.
Yeah. It's also interesting with your transformation into a cat is how you're able to speak so articulately without moving your mouth all the time.
Yeah, it's telekinetic, psychic, something.
Right. Well, there's been, the comics have actually, there's been a lot of good storytelling in comics that have happened over the past. I mean, you almost have to. They've produced so much. Most of it's garbage. Occasionally you get some good ones. And there was one where Bruce Banner had grown so old, he basically died, except that his Hulk form still exists. So he couldn't transfer back anymore. Like that part of it. It's sort of the same thing with Harrison Ford and the Red Hulk. When he's in Red Hulk form, he's like a different biological creature. So his age doesn't come into it at all. But if you have Black Captain America fighting Red Hulk, you also get Black Adolf Hitler in Namibia, and they just has to be that way. There's a law of conservation of normalness or strangeness, depending on how you want to look at it in the universe, and that just this is what has to happen. And here's the thing, Cavi. Not only does Namibia have some degree of Black Nazis, which is already a weird thing. Guess who? He's a fellow that we spoke of in previous shows. Oh dear, I'm not fully armored. Hold on, let me fix my armor here. Guess who we spoke of in previous shows? Who, in fact, in last show, who has a Namibian connection?
In the last show?
Yeah.
I don't even remember the last show. It was about sex. I remember that.
Right. And it was about a certain gay vampire.
Oh, Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel spent part of his childhood, he was raised, at least part of the time, in Namibia. Why? Because things have to be strange. So and then he moved to America after he left Africa, much like our other great African-American, Elon Musk. And he came out as gay and now is kind of at least a little bit secretly in control of the U.S. government through all his various tech companies. So we kind of have a gay Nazi who learned Nazism from Black people in control of the government in a shadow hand. And that's just Hakuna Matata. That's just the way the world has to roll. That's what I'm trying to get you to see, everyone, is that it's not like there could have, when you go a certain direction, the other has to, it's an ebb and flow, And it's because this is a, I don't know if it's a magical point, a metaphysical point, spiritual, who knows? But take notice of this and you will see it happen all over the place. Whatever you give attention to, that's kind of what you create in the world. And so when everyone spends multiple decades screaming about Adolf Hitler and Black people, what you produce is a Black Adolf Hitler. Now, is he actually going to be a Nazi in the sense that he's going to try to genocide people? I don't know. African countries do love a genocide, more so than many people give them credit for. But I do know that he wasn't offended enough about Adolf Hitler to worry about his name, and the people there weren't offended by it enough to not elect him multiple times. So it's just something that has to occur. And while at the same time, while everyone on the right is giving constant attention to gays and LGBT and homosexuality and all that stuff, what you get is now you get the trads are all like gay people who are like they're cottage maxing, pretending they're serfs, medieval serfs, but they're just gay, and the gay Nazi Peter Thiel, who is also kind of Black from Africa. And so everything everyone gives attention to will coalesce into some egregore of nonsense. And that's why things keep getting, because people don't know how to focus their psychic energy. They don't know how to focus their mind. What you give attention to, you help create, right? And so the way to fight the stuff is just to not care about it, like whatever. But when you make podcast after episode, after YouTube video, after essay, after blog post about look at all the sexual perversion, you just get more sexual perversion. You're giving it more airtime than anybody. Same with Nazism. The more you say the words white supremacy, the more it seems like whites are supreme. That's how the things work. Even if you're saying it in a negative context, like we need to stop white, you just keep saying white supremacy, it kind of makes it. The most white supremacist people in the world are white New Englanders. They just imbibe. They feel it is their duty to fix all of the brown people of the world. They have to go fix them, and that's and they're the most, and that's just what it is. And you must understand this principle, otherwise you're going to keep getting more and more into nonsense. The way to fight the stuff is it lives off your energy. It is fundamentally vampiric, and if you stop feeding it. If you stop feeding the troll will die. You cannot argue with the troll away because the troll just loves that. He's like, yeah, fight with me more about gay people and Nazis. Give me more. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until there's a black Adolf Hitler in Namibia who may be also gay. I don't know. I don't know anything about the man's sexuality. Wouldn't surprise me. There's a lot of gay stuff goes on. Gay people are surprisingly homosexual in Africa. In America too, but especially in Africa. Did you notice any of that while you were there?
No, I didn't really see a lot of gayness.
Yeah, they do it in the jungle. It's a thing. It's a whole thing. Here in the United States, they call it being on the down low, which means we're secretly gay. In Africa, one of the things they refer to it as, well, I don't want to go into it, but this is why there was always this connection between AIDS and homosexuality and eating what they call bushmeat, being like monkeys and stuff, because that's a euphemism in a lot of cases, and sometimes it's not. And I'll just leave it at that. So it's a euphemism. You go one place, you go into the jungle, the other place, you go in the down low. And it's not my fault. I'm just the messenger. I'm Joan of Arc. Don't shoot me. Right? I'm just the messenger. I'm just telling you how it is. I'm trying to get you to understand how the world works so you're not constantly surprised and shocked, and so you make better decisions about where to devote your psychic energy. Have you noticed anything in regard to this, Cavi, about how what you give attention to seems to happen?
Yes.
Give me an example in your own feline life.
My own feline life. Oh, you put me on the spot. I don't know. It's definitely a law of the universe. A while ago, Tucker Carlson was talking about what is it called? The MAPS people, minor attracted persons.
Right, which has nothing to do with us. We had that. Here's the pause. So I will address that to newcomers. We chose the name Mystical American Patriot Society before any one of us was aware that that was an acronym other people were trying to push called minor attracted persons or whatever, meaning pedophiles. And in your previous incarnation, before I melted you and then brought you back, Smokestack said we should change the name of it. And I said two things. One, I don't think this is actually going to take off as an acronym for them. And two, we can't live our lives in fear, running away. Anytime they make up a new strange word, you have to abandon the word. Like that seems like leaving ground. And I'm not going to let them have a weird act. And ours is better. And ours is better, and it's the Mystical American Patriot Society, and we're taking the acronym. Maybe we'll also take the KKK back. We're going to be the Cool Kids Club, spelled with K's, and I'll do it in sign language, so it's diverse and inclusive. The KKK, the Cool Kids Club, right? We're taking it all back. We're not going to let people just just treat words and signs like Voldemort and say, haha, I put a weird spell on it. Now you can't use that word anymore. You can't say that string of letters. You can't raise your hand anymore because you're hailing Hitler. I just feel like that's a losing position. And that's why we decided we're going to stick with the name that we chose beforehand, because we're not going to let them bully it out of us by being weird and perverted. Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but anyways, it might not be the best example, but he introduced a whole world of normies into that term, and they previously had no idea it was even a thing. And he did kind of like, can you believe this is a thing and how crazy it is and how bad it is? And now it's a thing because all these people were introduced to it.
Yeah, this is how it works. You say, can you believe all the drag queens reading to their children? And then it becomes like a thing people want to do, and they hear about it. And, this is just how the human mind works. You never are sitting there and you see someone drinking a soda and it doesn't flash across your mind, I should also drink a soda. That's what happens. You see someone do a thing, monkey see, monkey do. Primates see something, primates doing a thing, and they say, I should also be doing that thing. Because we sit in a weird place of like half herd animal, half predatory hunter animal. And just if we see it, we like to copy it. And so when you get on there and go, look at this, people go, oh, interesting. I guess that's the thing to do. And if you don't have the psychic energy to control yourself and not direct people toward the evil, and that doesn't mean you can't, there is a place for talking about negative things that happen and how to address them. But that place is probably not, the forum for that is probably not a large news station or a pundit, because what's going to happen is everyone's going to freak out about it, and it will just summon more of it into existence. That's what tends to happen. But yeah, so that's a great example. What you focus, this is, and why I've tried to steer people away from, don't look at the light, don't look at the darkness. Keep focusing on the light, don't focus on the darkness. If you focus on the darkness, there'll be more darkness. If you focus on the light, there'll be more light. That's just how it's going to work. To jump off that, I want to talk a little bit about Orwell. Are you familiar with George Orwell, the writer?
That writer, yes.
Okay.
Read 1984 and Animal Farm.
He did, as well as other things.
Yeah, I haven't read anything else.
He wrote an essay. I'm not going to get the title exactly right because I don't have it in front of me, but it was Politics in the English Language or something like that. In which you see in his time, you see that nothing ever changes. He's fighting the same fight I'm fighting now with people and using words in manipulative ways, often not even realizing it. And he went through this huge list of ways in which, in his own time, horrible things could be hidden in plain sight by using masking sort of language. As an example, genocide. What is that? If you said to a 7-year-old child, "There's a genocide," they would say, "What? What's genocide?" Right? And it doesn't really emotionally land even after you know what it is, because it's a kind of a Franken word. It's a Latin word and a Greek word smooshed together, geno inside, Greek and Latin. Geno is the Greek and Latin's the side, I think. And they smash together, and it's like, what does that really mean? And you say it in a passive voice. You say, "There's a genocide happening." It's just like it's a wind across the plain, like it's an act of nature. There's just a genocide moving across the plain. And you don't even know what a genocide is really whereas as Orwell pointed out, if you just say someone is killing them, someone is killing a bloodline, it's like, oh, that is really impactful. And all of a sudden very vivid. And people do this in part because they think it sounds more educated to use a lot of Latin root words rather than they think like it's this. You see this in business speak all the time, where you say, we'll utilize that instead of just use. Like there's no utilize. You've just added 2 extra syllables for no reason. It basically means the same thing as use. Let's utilize. It doesn't. It's just it makes people think if you waste energy, it's the same thing as doing busy work. Honestly, if you look busy, then people think that's good. If you look like you're frazzled, people think, oh, he's a hard worker, right? It's to say that's sort of what happens in language. You're serious if you're using fancy words, even if it obscures the meaning of what you're trying to say, often even from you. You see this in the medical field all the time. Arrhythmia. What is that? And it's really stupid. Like a doctor says, well, he had a case of arrhythmia. Like, what? You could just say arrhythmia just means in like Latin or Greek, red skin. You've got a reddening of the skin. It's so easy. You're saving syllables and you're being very accurate with how it's described. And if you have to look it up, it just says redness of the skin. You could just say red skin. He's got a rash. He has a rash. From some reason, viral, bacterial, whatever, but he's got a rash. They do this constantly. They can't just say the things that are like ulcerative colitis. He's got growths in the colon. He's got like it's not in his bowels. There are polyps. There are growths. Very easy to describe what's happening. You are technically more accurate and more vivid, but they don't want to do that because it doesn't sound professional, and it gives you this sort of asymmetrical power because the medical professionals know the lingo and you don't. Do you have any examples of this, Cappy? I saw your cat head poke in a couple times.
I do not. I'm just practicing being a cat.
Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. This happens all the time, and Orwell, he wasn't a proponent of English, although he was familiar with the idea before we had that name. English is the idea that what if we had English that didn't have any foreign derived words in it, like no French words, no because. After the Battle of Hastings, as I'm sure all of our listeners know, when the Normans took over the ruling class of Britain, who spoke French, which is a bit confusing because Norman means Northman, and they were basically French-speaking Vikings. And when they won the Battle of Hastings, that was the last time there was an actual English monarch. There hasn't been one since. All the rest of them have been basically French or German, including including King Charles now. So the English have been under foreign rule for about 1,000 years. And a lot of French words entered. This is why we have 2 different words for so many things. Like you don't say I eat pig, you say I eat ham. You don't say I eat cow, you say I eat beef, right? Beef is the French word, le bouffe, and cow is the English one. And that's not bad, right? But it does, and it has advantages because you can speak on 2 different registers. And over time, things like ghost means slightly different than things like spirit, although in the original they were the same. But you can also use this to confuse yourself by making up a lot of by saying a lot of words that don't really, because as children, all English speakers learn almost exclusively Germanic derived words because the simplest things you encounter, what people did to try and just like now in medieval England, after the ruling class was all speaking French, people wanted to seem fancy and upper class by speaking French. So when you were talking to peasants or when peasants were talking amongst themselves, they would throw in fancy French words whenever they could to sound fancy. But it's hard to sound fancy talking about cows, right? So, or your bones. So most of the simple words that you learn before you're the age of 10 are still mostly Germanic derived English Anglo-Saxon words. Bone, skin, blood, hurt, kill, life, like all these are very God, heaven. These are all very like Germanic based words. And they resonate with you on a strong level because of the first parts of language you learn. And you don't learn, I mean, you don't learn homicide until you're way older. But like a 3-year-old understands kill, right? Kill. And so that has an emotional resonance with you that it may be missing. And so you say a lot of things and it doesn't really impact you what you're saying. Like people talk about genocide like it's just another, like it doesn't really register with what's actually happening because they're hiding what they're talking about behind a bunch of fancy smancy talk. And in the same way, you can use this to disguise what you're doing as a doctor because you want to seem like you're more intelligent than you are. I know all the secret words and you don't. I could just say red skin, but I'm going to say erythemia to act like I'm super smart. In the same way, politicians do this. Theologians do this. Oh, theologians are so bad at this. They're so guilty of this. For every single stupid Greek word that they throw in there, like economia in the Orthodox tradition, you can just say economy. You can just say you don't have to be all fancy and stupid with it. Every single one of them, there's a clearer, much more simple word that describes the problem to all lay people instantly. You know, you don't have to say the problem of theodicity. I can't even pronounce it. Theodicity problem. The problem of pain. You can say the problem of suffering. Why is there suffering? Just very simple. That's an interesting philosophical. You don't have to, but if you say it that way, you sound like you're a fancy pants who knows more than everybody else, and you don't have to. You just get some authority because you don't know.
They need something for all these people to study in like seminary too, so they need fancy names.
They do. Otherwise, what would you spend your studying if everything was just in English, right? If you didn't have to learn a different name for everything, you know. And so, like, there's no reason to say hypostatic union. There's no reason to say that. You could just say what it is in English, and everyone would understand what you were talking about. But they're not speaking for clarity. They're speaking to sound schmancy. This is one reason. This is one thing. Although physicists are guilty of many sins, in my time in physics, I do and have come to respect that because they are very comfortable because they do not have. See, this is one thing you learn in academia: is every profession, when you become a physicist, every profession has physics envy. At least in the sciences, because in physics you can actually do experiments and make a formula, and you can say to like the 5th decimal place what is going to happen, and it do happen, just as you said, in a way that you cannot replicate in most of the other sciences. And physics has had a lot of success, and so because they're not self-conscious about their success, physicists know that they're success. They're like, our science is cool, and here's a nuclear reactor, or whatever. They will say words like spaghettified, to be made like spaghetti. When you go into a black hole, you're stretched infinitely thin like a thin piece of spaghetti, and it instantly is evocative of what's happening. They didn't make up a stupid Greek word to describe being stretched infinitely thin. They just said spaghetti-like. It's like spaghetti. And they say, what is it? It's a black hole. There's no Latin. It's a black hole. That's what it is. And it makes sense. You sort of get it instantaneously. This is why people like pop physics and pop science more than they like pop chemistry or pop medicine, because those places, those disciplines use a bunch of Greek words no one understands from the outset. And that is it's a huge advantage. And the reason that they can do that is they're not physicists, at least currently, are not self-conscious about their own lack of performance. Unlike theologians, which have done nothing for centuries, they've accomplished basically nothing. So they have to keep just making up fancier schmancier words to try and hide the fact that they're not talking about anything. This is my problem with David Bentley Hart, although I do like him, as a person, but he is very schmancy and he likes to throw in a bunch of big words that everyone has to go look up in a dictionary to make it sound like he's saying something more important than he is or more complicated than he is. And if he just spoken, you should always, one of the things I've always tried to do, this is attributed to Albert Einstein. I don't think he ever actually said it, but he said something near it. He said, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it. And that's absolutely true. If you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, if you can't just in simple words say what you're trying to do, you don't understand what you're talking about. And this is rife all over politics, and it's rife over theology. And specifically, I bring this up because I've encountered a lot recently people trying to call Jesus Christ Yeshua. Are you familiar with this, Gabby? The Yeshua people?
Yes. Not only that, but there's the Yeshua people are like Christian hipsters, I think. But then there's another whole level where they start calling God Yah, and some people call him like Yah-He Vav-He, the YHWH.
Yeah.
It goes like multiple levels. And it's just like, call him Jesus. Everybody knows the name Jesus. You say Yeshua, nobody knows. Like, I'm sure technically, yes, that was his name, but nobody knows what you're talking about when you say that.
Well, here's the thing. One, nobody knows, but two, that wasn't even his name. This is a totally ahistorical point of view from people who, one, it's like Christian hipsters, and two, it's fancy schmant people. But three, more nefariously, it is a group of people that are like heavy into the Christian Zionism, and they will justify any sort of slaughter 100 times before breakfast. And in general, if someone is saying Yeshua, there's like a 1 in 3 chance that they're a mass murderer in disguise. And everyone should be clear on that. Not all of them. Like I said, 2/3 of them are not mass murderers, but 1/3 is very like Yeshua, boom, 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 boom. And so watch out for that. But here's the problem, because there's been a big movement in Christianity over the past, at least in American Christianity, and that is the place it would happen. This is the place where people get weird. To be like, Christianity is basically Judaism plus. It's Judaism plus. They want to do Shabbos and they want to do Passover and all this stuff. And I've never understood this because, like, okay, I don't have anything against Jews. I really don't. I know I make fun of them, but that's because I can make fun of them with a clean conscience because I don't hate them. Right? I can make fun of them like I make fun of any group of people. But like there's nothing wrong with being, but if you're gonna be a Christian, it's just a different religion. It's not the same thing, right? And you can't, and pretending it's the same thing is like scraping over so much historical facts, theology, reasons for anything existing, like why this, and it culminates in this ultimate hypocrisy, which is now even promoted by the Vatican and promoted in many evangelical circles of where like you can be like the Jews, basically the Old Testament still applies. And as long as you're doing that, you also go to Jesus' sacrifice wasn't really matter. The Jews are also going to heaven. Because, and I think that this is why I agree with David Bentley Hart. I actually am a very hopeful universalist. And I think many, many more people will be able to eventually get to heaven than has been traditionally assumed, of all faiths and creeds and backgrounds. However, what is the point of like Christ's sacrifice if you could just be an Old Testament follower and get it anyway, which is something Paul explicitly says is not what we're talking about here. He goes over this Judaism, he calls them the Judaizers, the people who are like, well, yeah, Jesus, but he didn't really change anything. Is the whole, like, that's what most of his letters are about, is like that not being the case. And this is a recurring sort of fallacy that comes up in Christianity. And what it is people justify it by saying it's a bit of this wokeness that's crept in, and they say, well, Jesus was Jewish, and all the attempts to like call him Jesus and stuff, you're trying to make him a white Messiah and so forth and so on. And you've westernized Christ and everything. And that's not even remotely true. You know who westernized Jesus? His immediate followers, his apostles. That's who westernized him. It isn't. Here's the thing. Jesus, his apostles, Jesus probably did because he was, like a God. But Jesus's apostles, in almost all likelihood, I would put it at 98% probability, did not speak Hebrew. They did not speak Hebrew. Hebrew was a dead language at the time of Jesus, meaning that it was only spoken by the religious elite in specific circumstances. When Jesus is preaching to a Jewish crowd, he's not saying it in Hebrew because they wouldn't have been able to speak it. He would have been speaking either Aramaic, which is the language that's like Caiaphas, the Peter is an Aramaic name, it's not a Hebrew name, or in Greek. And he probably did both. When he stood up and read in the temple, he's reading the Greek Septuagint. He is reading a Greek translation of the Old Testament because the Hebrew one was lost. It was gone. They'd been conquered by Babylonians and Greeks and so forth and so on so many times. What they had and what they knew, they had fragments, but mostly the most intact version of the Old Testament they had is the Greek translation, and that's what Jesus would read from in the temple. And then, in all likelihood, I mean, can't be 100% certain that he didn't read the Hebrew and then explain everyone, but what they would have had would be the Greek Septuagint, or Septuagint, however you want to pronounce it. That's what they would have had, right? And then the Masoretic texts are not older than that. The Masoretic texts in Hebrew are a younger version. In fact, in many cases, translations of the Greek back into Hebrew. So here's the most interesting point. If you try to, and this is why it's so stupid to try and base all new biblical translations on the Masoretic texts. Because one, it's already a translation of something before it. So you could just go back to the original, and then you would have the one less step in this game of telephone. And two, the central prophecy about Christianity, connecting it to the Old Testament, where to be born of a virgin, is not found in the Masoretic text. They didn't like that one, so they didn't put it in. But it is found in the Greek Septuagint. And so at the time of Jesus, not only was the Old Testament in Greek, but every single New Testament writer wrote their Gospels or their epistles or their Revelations in Greek, all of them. Matthew, maybe there is a little bit of a chance that Matthew may have originally written his in Hebrew, but if he did, it was translated into Greek, and the original Hebrew has been lost. So the oldest one we have is also Greek there. Okay, so it's all Greek to me, and it was all Greek to the apostles, and it was all Greek to Jesus. It isn't a thing that white people came up after the fact and changed all the Hebrew to. No, it was already that way. It was already that way. No one was speaking Hebrew in the streets of Galilee. It just wasn't happening. That's a fictitious thing people have come up with in their Zionism craze. It's just not real. And so the most accurate, like if you want to say like, oh, well, let's go back and say Jesus is like phonetically what the apostles would have called him, is not Yeshua. That's something that was a translation of a translation many years after the fact. And when they started trying to reconstruct Hebrew for the common people, it was what you see in the Greek text, what the apostles wrote down and said, call him this. And it's not Yeshua, right? It's not Jesus either, but Jesus is the Anglicanized version of that, which is something more like Jesus. I can't really pronounce it correctly, but it's
Jesus.
Yes, it's something closer to the Spanish. If as an English speaker, if you've heard Mexicans say it, it'll be Jesus, something like that, is closer to the Greek, which is what the apostles wrote down and said, say it like this. It's not Yeshua, right? So the apostle said, if you want to know his name, here it is. This is the best. That's probably what Jesus answered to on the street sometimes. Or if it wasn't Aramaic and he was addressing people in Aramaic, it would have been something closer to, best guess, Yeshu, not Yeshua. Yeshua is out of nowhere. It is nothing. It's come from it's a nothingness. So it's not even, it's a totally ahistorical position. Now, here's the other thing is, again, I must impress upon people, we actually have no idea how any language was actually pronounced prior to being able to record it and make audio recordings of it. Prior to the late 1800s, we have no idea. We can guess, like we can go back and you can say, well, here's the modern version of this language, and here's the past one. And then we say, okay, well, this is a poem that was written in ancient, say, Greek or Latin, and these two words are rhymed. So we can, in this poem, so we can guess they were pronounced, and you can reconstruct a lot of it and so forth and so on. But again, one, that's sort of a poetic thing, and people use poetry in a different way than they use common speech. And two, that's not foolproof, and there was all sorts of counterexamples to all of that. So the written word and the spoken word are just not the same. They're just not the same, and there's not a one-to-one correlation between them. And so we really don't know, that's the truth of it, how someone on the streets of Jerusalem in the year 31 AD would have called Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, and we don't know what the actual sound would have been coming out of his mouth. We can kind of guess it was probably something close to Yesu, but it maybe the vowels were pronounced differently. Maybe the stress is put on the first. Maybe instead of Yesu, it was Yesu or Yesu. And really, who knows? We don't really know. Just like and to make matters worse, when you go into like Yahweh and Jehovah and all these other things people try to dig up, most of the Semitic languages, including Hebrew and ancient Egypt and so forth, Egyptian is not Semitic, I don't think, but it's in the same area. They didn't record the vowels because the way their language is structured, you just kind of knew it by the context when you were reading it. And so they just, like Tutankhamun's name, we don't know what the two and the ta and the min, we don't, when it's a guess. It may be totally different vowels. We just have the consonants. It may be Tutankhamun or something. You have no idea how it was actually pronounced. That's a guess. And that's the truth of basically all Egyptian words. When you hear ancient Egyptian spoken in a movie or something, that is the consonants, and they put vowels in there at random. That's really what happens. That's just what happened. Only for a very few words, usually the names of gods, did they include the vowels, like Ra. We're pretty sure Ra was something like Ra or Re or Re or something like that, because they did write vowels for like the top god. They would write out the whole thing. But for most people, including most pharaohs and rulers, they just wrote the consonants. And so who knows? That's true of ancient Hebrew as well. Is it Yahweh? No one knows. That's just something we've agreed upon now that later will probably change. And it has so all of this, the entire idea that you're going to get back and saying like similar phonetics, and this is somehow A, necessary, B, more valid and undoes colonialism when actually the apostles were the ones that did it, and C, more accurate. It's just it fails on all counts. It fails on all counts. And if you want to do it to be a hipster, I always support hipsterism. Great. If you want to do it to justify your weird Zionism, stop. That's my position. Don't, and just be aware in either case that what you're doing is kind of just a LARP and no one actually knows how it's pronounced. And the only way we know that the people that knew Jesus and spoke with him knew to call him is they wrote his name down in Greek. Okay. That's how they wrote it down. So take it up with them. If they were that concerned with you knowing the Hebrew name, they would have said it. And I doubt they ever even called them that, because again, they all spoke Aramaic. They may have known what the name would have been and this is another thing, it's like this is a very modern idea, extremely modern, like post World War II, that you do not translate names into a language. this is why at Ellis Island, people would, and this is actually fictitious, but people after they came to America would change up their name to match a more Anglo-sounding name because they were trying to fit in. And so Wilhelm comes to America and he becomes William, or Jorge becomes George, right? And this is a very modern thing that it's somehow disrespectful to not do this. But actually, when you speak English, it's normal to use the English names for things. You don't have to go to the taco stand and suddenly for like one sentence say tamales. I would like tamales. Like you're some crazy schizophrenic person. Or I would like a croissant. And you become French for a half a millisecond. You can just say tamale, croissant, and Jesus like a sane person who speaks a language that has words for things. And you don't have to constantly pretend that you need to. It just makes you sound insane. And it makes you do a lot of insane things, including justifying the killing of many, 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 many people. You can just speak English. It's fine to just have words. And we don't, Japan's name, no one in Japan calls it Japan, guys. And it's not, you're not being mean by calling it Japan. They call it Nippon, right? We're not being mean to call Germany when they call it Deutschland, right? Other countries, when they talk about England or the United States, they don't call it the same name. They have a different name for it, and that's fine. Languages have different names for different things. Dog isn't the same in all languages, and that's okay. It's not offensive. Cavi, did you have something to say? I saw you drift into your reactor room.
Not really. I was just going to say I can't stand those people who order food in the exact pronunciation of whatever language and then immediately go back to English and think they're so cool, so much better than everyone.
If you want to practice speaking Spanish, go for it. But then do more than one word. Like agua, por favor, salsa verde, or whatever you want to practice. But if you're just trying to say it, it's so dumb. Stop it. Please stop for a half millisecond drifting into another language and pretending that's more accurate. The most recent we did this was with the Ukraine. Now, people were like, well, it's dismissive to call it the Ukraine. It's Ukraine. Is it dismissive to call the Netherlands the Netherlands? No, because the Netherlands means the lowlands. Nether, right? Nether, down, lands. Because it's under sea level. That's why we call it that. It's the Netherlands. And they built, the dikes and the stuff and the boy with the finger. In the same way, Ukraine means borderland. And we called it the Ukraine is the borderland. Right? It's not offensive. This is not some white supremacy thing. This is just words in a language and how they work out. In Germany, they call Switzerland the Swiss, basically, or der or die Swiss. I don't remember which. It's der or die Schweiz, I think. Turkey is die Turkey. They put a the on the front of it. We don't do that. It doesn't matter because it's a different language and they speak of things in a different way. And the idea that you are somehow being more Christian or more holy by saying Yeshua, a totally made up word, rather than just G is stupid. And you're either doing it because you're a hipster, in which case, mazel tov, or you're a nefarious person trying to blur the lines between Christianity and Judaism to try and get gullible people to believe that Israel's current bid for expansion across all the Middle East at the expense of bombing a bunch of children is justifiable. Right? That's what's happening. And again, I have nothing against the Jewish people at all. I just think, hey, what you're doing right now in that Israel place, not cool. In the same way that lots of countries do things that are not cool over time. This isn't a Jew. It's just stop doing that. Don't that thing you're doing right now. No bueno, right? It's not me being against the Jewish people. And it's frankly really annoying when people try to say that. They go, oh, the Holocaust. Oh, the Holocaust. Oh, the Holocaust. The Holocaust. You can't just say the Holocaust and then throw a grenade at a baby. It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to buy it. I agree the Holocaust was horrible. Okay? Yes. That doesn't mean you can now blow up a baby and you say the Holocaust and that makes it okay. Right? Are we agreed? I think all Jews of good character who are being honest will agree with me, and I think there's a lot of them. Anyway, so that's number one. It's okay to speak English. It's actually fine. It's actually fine to speak English. You can just say English words. And if you don't, you're probably either trying to be schmancy pants or trying to deceive people. And everyone should see through you and see what you're doing. Number two, Cavi, this is a I don't know. This is a new thing I'm working on. It's not entirely my idea. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm waiting for you to ask me or whatever.
Okay, great. Well, while you're there, before I get going, a hat tip to our dear friend Cinder Tip. I forget if she said I could use her real name or not. I don't remember, but we'll put her link to her store on the thing. She makes these wonderful little things. She sent me some gifts. Look at this. It's a little sumo wrestler she makes it out of burning, like a wood burning thing. And she made me a scroll.
Ooh.
You know, a few people in my life have sent me scrolls. Very few. She made me a beautiful scroll. She also does calligraphy, which is the G.K. Chesterton's The Skull poem.
That's cool.
It's very cool. I'm going to get it framed. But it came
Get her to make a code. Get her to make a Maps coat of arms.
Oh, a Maps coat of arms. Yes, we should do that. Chattering finch and butterfly are not merrier than I. Here among the flowers I lie, laughing everlastingly. No, I may not tell the best, but surely, friends, I might have guessed. Death was but the good king's jest. It was hid so carefully. And so, for the Christmas holidays, everyone go out and help a British woman living in Wales. She's not a Welsh woman. They get finicky over the exact specifications over there. She's not ethnically Welsh. She is ethnically British, English, but she's living in Wales, and she's doing wonderful art. And we'll include her link. And I'm going to say, hurry up and do it to get in time for Christmas. And she's probably going, no, don't say that. It's so close to Christmas. I can't, anyway, go visit her shop. I was very impressed with her work, and she sent me some wonderful things. Wonderful listener. Thank you again, Cinder Tip. This is something I'm working out, Cavi. Okay. It goes along with my general idea of trying to demystify, in a way, the spiritual and trying to show people that there's actually not a huge division between like the gods are the planets and the angels are the stars and the so forth and the so on, and the spirit is the breath. Here's the next step. Where is God? I give it to you, Kevin.
Everywhere, and also outside of our universe. And also, I can't fully understand because he's God.
Here's something. This is an interesting, Thomas Aquinas, who was wrong about a lot of stuff. This is the thing. If I get too close to the camera, it starts to freak out.
Yeah, your lights are going crazy.
It's okay. Aquinas, who was a brilliant man, wrong about a lot of stuff. And people say, well, I won't go into that. But this is something that he said that was very interesting. When he was trying to define God, and like what God is. So, because he brings up a very reasonable point, which is like everyone talks about God, but everyone says you can't define what you're talking about. So how is that reasonable? And so he basically describes God as not, because what most people go to is creator, highest being, or so forth. And Aquinas rightly points out that if you refer to him as the highest being, that is not quite high enough, because there's existence itself. And so he identifies God with being itself, existence itself, like I am, just the I am that I am. I exist. It is just this. It is being itself, existence itself. And so to tie it in a little bit with the Eastern traditions, it's a little like saying, in fact, it's actually exactly like saying that he's nothing, which is not to say that he doesn't exist, but he's he's no thing. He's not a thing in the world. He is rather that which all the things in the world depend upon. Much like when you look out at the world, you don't see your eyeball unless you have a cataract, right? Your eye exists and is there, but it's not one of the things in your field of vision. It is the media, it is the thing by which all else is seen. And this is something C.S. Lewis said. He said, I believe in God not because I see him, but because by him I see everything else. Just like when you look out a window, unless you're paying attention to it or someone points it out to it, you don't see the glass. I say, what's there? And you look and you say, oh, there's a tree, there's some water, there's a car. You don't say, oh, I see the glass, usually, right? Because you look through it. God is something more like that. He's not a thing. He's nothing, but that nothing exists in a way. It's hard to quantify because and so I was thinking about this idea and like trying to more closely map for people the spiritual onto the material, because I don't think there's that huge of a difference. In fact, I think they're basically the same, viewed from two different angles. And I think we've done a huge disservice to ourselves and others by pretending that there is an eerie-feary, ethereal world of metaphysics and Plato's forms, that's totally divorced from the physical world of matter and kinetic energy and so forth. And that these two, never the twain shall meet, and that makes understanding, it commits to me the cardinal sin of making the thing you're talking about unfalsifiable, because it's like, well, I guess in this made up world of metaphysics that you have, anything could be happening. And so you could say anything, right? And so I've been trying to think of more of God in a more physical way. And how would that be? Where is God, and so forth and so on. Let me give you a thought experiment, and I don't know how long we'll spend on this because I don't know how far I have to go with it. But what if in a very real way, what if the reason God is in heaven is because God is space? And I don't mean out there. I just mean three-dimensional space. Think about it. This is what we live, move, and have our being in. It's always here. It's omnipresent, right? It's presumably omnipotent because all this stuff arises out of space. And if you are space, you kind of would know everything, right? What else has the three omnis and is all present and is kind of akin to seeing the world? Like you see the world, but you don't see your eyeball. You see through the window, you don't see the glass. You see all the things existing in space and I guess time, because they're related. But you don't see space and time itself. It is kind of like, to use the biblical phrase, that in which we live, move, and have our being, which is ascribed to Jesus. And that idea is a very interesting one because it also that lines up with like the Buddhist idea of like the self is the great void, the nothing, and so forth and so on. And like ancient Babylonian myths of like which is where we get the name El, like Daniel or Nathaniel, the EL on the end of it, or Gabriel means God, and that's a Sumerian name for God, El. When they're fighting and Tiamat, the great void, and he tames the chaos of the void and brings forms out of it, right? It's sort of that, because what we have is space, and somehow matter is like bubbling out of it in these different forms. And I'm not sure how useful that is, except that if you begin to think of it that way, you see that space is fundamentally the relationship between objects, which had a weird synchronicity to my general thing of being like existence is relationship, which is something I've said on here before. Because how do you know what is a distance? A distance is defined by two things. If you just had one thing in all of space, no distance exists. You'd have to have it's the relationship between two things that make a distance. And so it's this very malleable idea. It's like this. There's a distance doesn't exist except as relationship, and and yet it defines. If there was no distance, there would just be one thing, right? And so the space has to exist and expand in order to give rise to. It's sort of like the what is the old Jewish phrase? I forget, but this is a Jewish phrase. I wish I could say it so that I could give them more. Yes, Kathy.
I'm not good at switching here. I was just rubbing my hands together because you were talking about Jewish.
I thought you were. That was the feline way of saying, "I have a question."
No, it's just a Jewish cat puppet.
Okay. Yeah. That's the joke online is that Jews do this because they're money grubby, and white people are passive aggressive and they're Karens, and black people, I guess, have I don't know, guns.
I'm not good at controlling this body yet, so I'm jumping around here.
Okay, I forget. I wish I knew the Jewish word for it, but the self-emptying of God, where God self-empties to give rise to the world, and so, and just like you do with God, the more you get into what space and time are, the fuzzier it becomes. Because you think of space and we use it as a noun, and we get very upset when physicists go, space has qualities. Because you say, how can nothing have qualities? Because it isn't nothing in the sense that it doesn't exist. It's nothing in that it's the sense that it's not a thing. It's not like a thing you can point to. And they say space is curved. You say, well, what does that mean? And what does that mean? Or that space expands or contracts. And again, you say, how can it do that? And again, how can it do that? Like, this is not something that's very intuitive. But space has properties. And so we use it as a noun. There's space. But you can also create space. You can make a space. You can create distance. You can, like therapy speak, you can hold space. You can also use it as a verb, though. It can be a thing that spaces. It's spacing it out. It's and so it's kind of everything. I don't think that's just a trick of the language, because language can't fool you like that. I think that is a deep intuition about what space is. It's a thing that's like a verb, a noun. In some cases, it's an adjective. And it's kind of occupying this like, it's omni. It's got the omnis, at least some of them. I think you could argue it has all of them, because in physics, there's this idea that in empty space, nonetheless, matter would boil up into and pop out, which sounds weird, but like popcorn kernels. There's like a valent energy in space, and matter pops out of it, so it can create anything, I guess. So it's got the omnis. It's sort of the ground in which we live, move, and have our being. It's deeply humble. Like, it's not a thing that calls attention to itself at all. It's like Lao Tzu said, the Tao loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. And so perhaps, just perhaps, think about this, run with it a little bit, meditate upon it. Maybe in a very real way, what God is so fundamental, and he's not in a different place from our material reality, but he is the stage in which material reality happens. That would be very in line with Aquinas' thinking. He is space and time, like space and time sort of are God. That's why God is eternal, because he is time, right? And when you connect with God, you're into the realm of eternity. And that's why he's in heaven, because heaven is where all the space is, and that's why the angels, which are the stars, which I spoke about earlier, are closer to God because they're up in the space, right? It all kind of makes sense. So that's something just to meditate. That's all I got on that one. I just thought that's an interesting idea, and I wanted to throw it out there for our listeners to maybe hit back on me on. Yes, Kathy.
Okay, so expanding on a couple of things, because it's I like that idea. Another couple of things. So you've got the Trinity, right?
Yeah.
So God the Father could very well be space, and then you also have Jesus, who is a physical human that can exist anywhere in that space. Um, so that's some interesting Trinity stuff. The other thing I'm thinking too is I've heard this before that God is literally holding everything together because
Yeah.
at the center of every atom you have protons and neutrons, but you've got basically an overabundance of positive charge. So the nucleus should be like expanding out, but
Right.
something is holding everything together, and they're just like, I don't know, it's nuclear glue or something. So
Mhm.
what if that is also God, like literally holding every atom together?
I mean, I think it very well may be. And in fact, the same applies to galaxies. Galaxies, if they're real, if,
Assuming.
assuming if they're spinning around at the speed that they are spinning around at, they should be hurling everything away from them. And the way the physicists have countered this is say, well, there must be a lot of dark matter, and that doesn't mean anything weird. It just means matter that isn't illuminated by starlight, because what you see in galaxies is the light of stars. So a lot of, I don't know, nebulous gas, a lot of planetary material, meteorites that we can't see, which have gravity counteracting that force. The problem with that is then you said, well, I guess 99% of the universe is something we can't see and we're just pretending we have evidence for. I don't like dark matter as a theory. I think it is, but anyway, maybe it is the same thing. Maybe there's just a force that holds things together when they are in opposition, which is a very godlike thing to do. I'm trying to get people to see the divine in the material world. That's what I want you to be able to do, because it is there. You can see it right. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. What Jesus always said. And how about this one for another thing? There's that Buddhist phrase: you cannot drive a nail into the sky. And what they meant by that when they said that, I think that was coined. Hold on, here's a deep pull, and this may be wrong. I think that was coined by the sixth Buddhist patriarch of Nepal. But I may not be right. I don't remember. I think it was a sixth Buddhist patriarch of somewhere. And he said, you cannot drive a nail into the sky, because what they meant by that was you cannot really pin down what the ultimate reality is. You cannot nail it down, right? Aha. And why? But human beings always had the need to. So then the ultimate reality comes and lets you physically nail him down and say, there he is, right there. Right. And so again, it adds another layer onto the crucifixion, which I'm constantly finding addresses basically every human need in this crazy way. Like, God is undefinable. We cannot pin down what it is. Boom, right there. Pin it down. Literally pin it down. And I think that's very profound. I'm not sure that it goes much more than that, but you cannot drive a nail into the sky, so you had to drive a nail into Jesus. I think that may be actually true. Anyway, again, moving on. I want to discuss how metaphysical, the metaphysics of faith and miracles and having your prayers answered. Because this is a thing that I've noticed every time it appears that I have a prayer answered. What comes along with that is a way out. God gives you a way out every time. I think this is true. In that, you pray for a thing or you ask for a thing, and it happens. And but what always happens along with that is something else happened in the interim that you could attribute the change to that isn't divine working. And so if you want to disbelieve, even after your prayers have been answered, you have an option. You have an explanation that avoids the divine. And I think this sort of came to me one day. If you ask God for something immediately, right? If you ask God for, I don't know what it is. Let's say I need let's make it simple. I need $100. God, give me $100, and then before your eyes, $100 bill materialized, right? Which I don't think is beyond God's ability to do. But let's say he did that. Where does that leave you? Right? That's kind of a curse. Because now you don't have any excuse to not believe, or you think you're insane, right? You either have to become like a zealot who is like totally 100% like, I know, and I really don't have any excuse. Paul talks about this. The more, or maybe not Paul, but the more the one is given, the more one is expected. And so, like, if you knew Jesus personally or one of his disciples, more was expected of you than if you were a guy that heard it 1,000 years later, because you had less room to say, well, I couldn't be sure, and that kind of destroys the path you had for your life, maybe in a good way, but maybe not in a way you were ready for or could even handle. And so, think about, there's a beautiful story. You ever think about what happened to Lazarus after he was raised from the dead? How traumatic, right? Was that actually a kindness from his perspective? And so there's a story. It's an apocryphal story, but it's an interesting one. Going back, I don't know, many, many hundreds of years, that Lazarus was, for the rest of his days, very sullen and very serious because, like, well, I've been dead and I know there's a heaven and a hell and I know that I'm going to die again relatively soon in the span of eternity. And so I better make sure that I don't do anything to mess it up and go to the bad place after I was in the good place. And now I'm like this, And so he's very like somber and like serious. They said he never laughed. He never laughed after he was raised from the dead, except one time when he saw a man carrying an earthen jar filled with dirt. Who knows why? I guess ancient Jerusalem landscaping. He was going to go pot a plant or something. He's carrying an earthen jar full of dirt. And Lazarus is said to have involuntarily burst out laughing and said, "Ha! Dirt carrying dirt." Because, mankind is made from the dust of the ground. And so, like, if that happens to you, if Jesus were there and he put his hand on you and you could not see and now you can see, or you could stand up and walk, you don't have any room to play there anymore, right? It's like become right in your face. And I think that is a harder thing to deal with than people are ready for. And so, although God might very well answer your prayers in such a direct fashion, I think he usually, as a mercy, gives you an option to say, well, but that wasn't, was that really God, right? It's like that the old story. A woman is on top of her roof during a flood. She is seeking refuge from a flood. Her house is flooded. Maybe she's in the Netherlands, the lowlands, and the dikes have broken. And the Netherlands is being flooded, and she's on the top of the roof. And she's praying to God to save her. And a boat comes along. She says, "Get in the boat." She says, "No, I'm waiting on God to save me." And then a guy comes along on another raft, and she says, "No, I'm waiting on God." And a guy comes along in a canoe. She says, "No, thank you. I'm waiting on God to save me." Guy comes along in a helicopter, and she says, "No, thank you." And the waters rise, and she drowns. She gets to heaven. She says, "Why didn't you answer my prayer to save me?" He said, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "A canoe." I said, "A raft." I said, "A boat." I said, "A helicopter." And you refused them all. Like, he's working in this. He works in that way, because then after it's over, you can say, well, like, you don't owe him. See, he's doing it in a way where you don't owe him. You don't feel this obligation. You still have your free will in a way. Because if, in the same way, this is why God has to be invisible. If God were visible, no one could see anything but God. He has to be so humble right? If space were visible, we would see, I mean, nothing, you would see nothing but space. And so to facilitate everything else that's not him existing, because he is so great and all-encompassing, he has to be incredibly humble. And one of the great fears that people have subconsciously is that if they get too close to God, they will lose themselves, right? They will lose their free will. Like they will be so dwarfed by his everything. This is one reason people fear becoming saints, because I will lose. Now, the trick in that is sort of true in one way. In another way, realize if you define yourself by struggle, and this is how people egoically define themselves. Like people, when they talk about the real world, people talk about the real world. What they mean is the world that resists you, the bills that are hard to pay, the boss you don't like, realpolitik with all that's disgustingness, wars, disease, so forth and so on. And so they define themselves by what I am against. And that's not because when things, existence is relationship. And so two sticks stand up because they lean against each other, right? And so you're against something, and then that's how you know you're there, right? You're against something, and that's how you know you're there. If you existed all alone in space, you might even not realize you existed. In Flatland, by Edwin Babbitt, A Square, they go to the different dimensions. A two-dimensional creature, a square, is visited by a three-dimensional creature, a sphere, who, as he bisects the two-dimensional plane, appears as a circle of ever widening and shrinking dimensions. And this opens Babbitt's, the square, mind up to the idea of different dimensions. He travels to the one dimension, which exists on a single line, and all the inhabitants of it exist side by side, and you can only ever know your immediate neighbor over here or over here, and you can only know of other people by the chain of telephone and saying, well, 3 people down from me, there's another person, and he says this, and then he goes to the 0 dimension, which is just a single point, and in that point there's a person, a consciousness, and anything he hears. So Edwin tries to talk to him. He assumes he has thought it because he has no ability to conceive of anything beyond the point. And so Edwin says, hey, hello there, I'm a square. And he goes, oh, what a strange thing I thought. I don't even know what a square is. And he's unable to conceive of anything existing outside himself. And so you define yourself. If you were all alone in the space, in the universe, you might not even realize you existed as an individual thing. But because you're against things and you want to do X, but the world blocks you, then you know that you're real and you have a conception of self. And if God did come to you in that sort of very in-your-face way, you might lose that. You might, because then you'd be like, oh, well, there's actually nothing, that all the obstacles against me are sort of removed. If God came in and immediately wiped out all of your problems, you kind of would lose yourself in a way that would, I think, break you more than you. Or if you had if they were all miraculously removed, what are you going to do? Who are you? You have no problems. You have nothing to do. There's no quest. There's no thing to solve. There's no issue. What now? Who are you? Right? And so long as you exist in that mode, it's a mercy to not reveal himself to you. This is why no man can see God's face and live. Because if you did, it's very deep. But if you then can flip and know yourself as not by what you're against, but by the fact that you are loved by the Almighty. If you can see yourself in that, then you realize you could never die, because what the Almighty loves can never go away, right? It could never. How could that ever vanish? So your strength, your bit of self becomes even more strong, but not in the negative way where you're defined by negativity, but in the positive way. And so I've noticed that God always gives you an out. And you can always see this when you ask to be healed of a disease. If you're eventually healed, you say, well, it was the doctors, the medicine, the exercise, the fact I cut out bread, whatever. He's going to give you some other change of circumstance that you can attribute your healing to as a mercy to you in your current state. And in the rare cases he doesn't, it kind of makes people go crazy. And they're like, well, I got to go be a monk now, I guess, because I just had this crazy experience. You become Saul of Tarsus. You're Saul, and you're doing it. And then Jesus appears to you in a blinding light. He's like, well, I got to upend my entire life and go be shipwrecked a couple of times and base my whole life around this because, that's a lot to ask of somebody. That's a lot to ask of somebody. And if you notice, Jesus didn't actually ask that of Paul directly at all. He just showed himself to Paul. And that was enough for Paul to be like, well, this destroys everything now. It's like, I said, going back to Aquinas, he spent all of his life writing theology and writing about God and reasoning. And toward the end of his life, he actually had a mystical vision in which he said, Jesus in some form appeared to him. God appeared to him, and it's unclear exactly how this worked, but he just said, I had a vision of Christ. And he put down his pen and he said, I'm not writing anything else. And all of the people in his monastery were like, you have to, you're doing great work. And he says, everything I've written, I regard as straw compared to what I have now seen. And it kind of broke his ability to do the work that we all appreciate. Because he was like, well, nothing I ever wrote that did it justice. Nothing. And then he shortly died there afterwards. His life had to be over. No man can see God's face and live. And so God will always give you, this is how it works. And I tell you that so that you can be aware of it and you can consciously make the choice when your prayers are answered, what you want to attribute it to. Was it the fact that you cut out bread and started doing Pilates or the steroids? Or was it the God healing you? Was it the fact that you read that book about how to better money manage and now you're not in so much debt? Or was it the fact that God, there's always an out. That's the way it has to work. Because if God were visible, no one would see anything but God. That's the thing. Anyway, Cavi, how are you? I always wonder if anything I say makes sense. I never know.
I think, too, one thing that has to do with all that is God not revealing himself directly is a mercy. Because people are like, oh, yeah, I would totally believe God if he just showed up in front of me one day and stuff. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, if that happened, well, now you know that God is real, right?
Right.
God might have rules. If you have a kid and your kid does something that they're not allowed to do, but you never told them explicitly, hey, you're not allowed to do this, well, you can't get that angry at the kid, right? It's like, well, they didn't know. But if you tell your kid, hey, don't do this specific thing, and then the kid goes and does that, well, now, yeah, I'm going to have to punish you. So it's also kind of an act of mercy over sin, because you can be like, well, there's an element of, well, they didn't really know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is for a very good reason. For a very good reason is God hidden. But also, once you have eyes to see, he's not hidden at all. Until next time, everybody. Namaste. We love you. Don't vote for Adolph Hitler unless he's the black guy. He seems okay. I don't think he's actually a Nazi. Peace out.